Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's Audit Committee. Can I start, as usual, by welcoming our friends from KPMG, external auditors, to this meeting. And can I ask if there are any apologies? No apologies. Okay, thank you. And can I ask if there are any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest other than myself. I would like to declare a non-financial interest in respect of item 5.2, the Health and Social Care Partnership, as I'm a member of the Integration Joint Board. And Councillor Donaldson will be dealing with that particular item on the agenda. And also with item number 8.
Convener, I'd also like to declare a non-financial interest as a voting member of the Integration Joint Board.
Thank you so much, Councillor McDade. Okay, moving on first of all to the minutes of the meeting of the Audit Committee on the 27th of March, which you've seen these. Are there any issues arising from that? Councillor Wilson, yeah.
Thanks, Convener, and good morning. I've no issues with the minute at all. But I wondered if I could ask a question on page 7.
Sure.
Item carbon reduction and climate change.
Sorry, you've lost me. Where's the...
Page 7.
Yeah, okay.
Item 58.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Carbon reduction and climate change. Sorry, this microphone appeared to be on, and I think it's now properly on. I'm on page 7 of the minutes. I've just asked if I could ask a question on that.
Of course.
Thanks. Like yourself, Convener, and probably other members, elected members of the Council, we're getting a wee flurry of letters in from enthusiasts on the subject of climate change crisis, etc. And they're not just one-liners to say, can you do this or can you do that, or what's your policy? They're quite comprehensive notes. And I just wonder, given that the Council are treating this seriously, is there any guidance that officers could maybe make available to elected members so that we were providing at least some consistency of reply about, we can all give our personal views in the matter, but I think what the correspondents are asking is some view of the Council's views on this. And I just wonder if we could come up with maybe it's not quite a Q&A list, but some sort of comprehensive answer, so that if officers are preparing a reply to some of these things, and I've asked for a couple of times, first of all, save officers time, so we've got a consistent approach to the thing, and secondly, elected members, irrespective of their political allegiances, are giving some guidance of what the Council's view is, not their own view.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll just shout. Because of, obviously, we've always had climate on as a risk, but because of the particular publicity around certain policy direction. This was discussed yesterday at the Executive Officer team in terms of reviewing the Strategic Risk Register to make sure that we're covering all bases. I don't think there'll be any problem in us giving you some sort of brief guidance in the interim. And I know that Peter Marshall was going to be coming back to do a more detailed workshop in due course. So we'll take that on board, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. That would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's an extremely valid point you make, Councillor Wilson, and thank you for that, and we'll ensure that there is some form of guidance that comes forward as soon as practically possible. Councillor Donaldson.
Oh, that is now, right. Just quickly, yes, I did in fact ask at the last Audit Committee if we could get a detailed briefing, and you'll see from the minutes Peter Marshall stated that this would be done, but it would be sensible to wait at the outcome of the new legislation going through the Scottish Parliament. I certainly think we need that detailed briefing. We have the waste management report, I think usually comes up about November. We haven't had a climate change report since 2017, but yes, I think in the interim it would be very helpful to have a briefing to councils and then a more detailed briefing later.
Indeed, thanks for that. Yep. Okay, are there any other items arising from the minute? Okay, can we agree to approve the minutes? Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 4 on the agenda, internal audit follow-up. Jackie, can I ask you to speak to this report, please?
Thank you, Convener. I've put forward a revised format for the follow-up report this time, which I'm hoping will assist councillors to focus on the content of the appendix rather than get tied up with the contents of the table, which I think was quite confusing on occasions. So I'm hoping that this format is more straightforward and more simpler for you to read and to understand and to focus on. So I'd welcome any feedback on that. Of the 13 actions which were due to be completed within the period of February and March 2019, 11 had been completed, and the 2 which are on the appendix are the 2 which remain outstanding at the time that the report was published. I'm happy to take any questions or any comments on this report.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Firstly, thank you for the work you've done on the format. I certainly found it much easier to follow, and I do appreciate that. If colleagues are otherwise minded, please say so. But are there any questions to Jackie on this report? Councillor McDade.
It's not a question, just to say I also found the new format, much more comprehensive to follow. Basically, I preferred it. It was getting us straight to the point of what we were actually supposed to be looking for there, and gave us the detail.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. The new format's extremely helpful and saves a lot of thinking power as well as time, so much appreciated. On the first item, roads maintenance partnership, I should know this, but Convener, you can keep me right if you want to, but has the report gone to an E&I committee?
Yeah, Fraser, if you want to comment on that. Thank you.
So thanks for the question. Yes, that was approved at the E&I committee last week.
Okay, so will that now come off the agenda?
That'll come off the agenda now, yes.
Right, okay.
Thankfully.
And secondly, over the page, I see that the chief accountant was to contact the relevant services, request that reporting arrangements be verified as correct by June. Now we're nearly there. Just wondered if that's still on target.
Yes, I believe so. Unfortunately, as you see, we don't have a finance representative here today. Unfortunately, Scott Walker is involved in the election, and Mr Mackenzie has preferred the dentist over today's audit committee. So, Fraser, by all means.
Sorry, just to confirm that Scott did get in contact with the services, and we're on track for dealing with that action point.
Okay. Well, if the 2 gentlemen here are nodding, that's fine by me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? Okay, can we agree to note the report? Thank you. Well, okay, so now moving on to item 5, the internal audit update. Do you want to say any overarching comments at the moment, Jackie, on it? Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I will, if I may. First of all, I'd like to just reiterate what's in the report, that this is the report which kind of pulls together all the work that was undertaken for the 18-19 plan. Hence the reason that the section 2 on the outcomes from consultancy and advisory work contains more information than has been in previous ones, because some of these assignments have taken place over the entirety of the year. with regard to the outcomes from consultancy and advisory work, sections 2.2 to 2.5 relate to work that is ongoing and is being refocused for the coming year in relation to ALIOs. Section 2.6, 2.8 relates to transformation, which again will continue into 2019-20 as transformation does remain as a risk area. And again, we'll be looking at the different focus for the work that we're undertaking there. In section 2.13, we're highlighting the Tay Cities deal. And I am working with colleagues in Dundee and indeed Angus and Fife to arrive on the best way forward to take audit work forward in both the short and the medium term with regard to Tay Cities deal. So those things are works in progress as far as the update report is concerned. If you've got any questions or any comments, then I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. So, this is not the individual reports which follow, so if colleagues could please confine their comments to the overarching report 5.1 and the updates and the reports on the outcomes of the consultancy work that has been undertaken during the course of 2018-19. Do you have any questions? Councillor Williamson.
Yes, thank you, Convener. It's on page 19, 2.12. It's whilst we're trying to create a resilient workforce and moving forward, my concern is that we only have a limited resource and it's getting tighter and tighter. Are we paying particular attention to how much extra time staff are actually putting in over and above what they're contracted to do, and is that being monitored?
Is there somebody that can comment on? Lisa, thank you.
I mean, I think senior management, corporate management group and EOT are aware that there's an awful lot of discretionary effort. However, we don't have a formal time recording system, so other than clock in and clock out and obviously getting monthly flexi time reports, there's not actually a way of capturing what people may be doing at home or of a weekend, but we are aware of discretionary effort, and it's something that we're trying to manage.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks for the detail in the report. It's very useful. On transformation, my question is not necessarily an audit type question, but I'm just wondering where transformation now fits into the organisation, because it has been driven a lot, and there's regular reports to, I think, the SP&R committee, but it's been driven largely by savings as well as change. And I think there's an increasing emphasis on change and thinking about how we do things. Councillor Williams' point about more responsibility and less people to do it is apposite in this. And it's becoming much more about how we do things within the council, and particularly cross-departmental working. I'm just wondering where it fits in, not as a risk, because there is a risk, but where it fits in generally, and how it might fit in the future to our strategic thinking and forward planning. Now that's a kind of big question, and I'm not sure if...
I'm not sure it's right entirely relevant to
it's a bit of a blue sky question.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
No apologies for asking.
But Lisa's volunteered to pass comment on that.
I don't know if you recall, but the Chief Executive, when she responded to a question, I think it was either in SP&R or the last council, had actually said that when this programme of transformation came to an end in 2020, that we wouldn't be doing a standalone transformation strategy, because basically change is the day job and managing that change is the day job, and transformation now really just needs to be embedded in our everyday activities as we try to do more with less and better. In terms of big significant strategic change or change in direction, I think that will all be wrapped up in the Perth and Kinross offer, and that will be shaped really by what feedback we get from communities, stakeholders, and how we shape what our strategic priorities are for the medium and longer term going forward. So in terms of a standalone transformation programme and strategy, that will probably wind down and embedded. Programmes and projects, however, are still subject to a stringent project management regime, are reported through the Strategic Investment Board, and there will be updates on that coming through to SP&R.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Convener. And just also to say that I thought on Appendix 1 it showed how much internal audit's done in the last wee while since our last meeting. My questions around the Tay-Cities deal, and the Chief Internal Auditor touched on it in her overview, and it says that she's conducted a brief internal assessment, initial assessment of where internal audit may be able to add value, and I'm wondering if she might be able to expand on that.
Well, there's a number of areas that that I've looked at. Particularly, I've reviewed what information is being shared between the local authorities through their shared the shared portal, and the conversations that I've had with Dundee have been very fruitful to work out what will be our next steps and what we can actually add value with at this early stage. Looking at the overall governance arrangements and how these are being implemented within local authority, within the individual local authorities. But we've also had the conversations with Fife, and we're learning from any work that they've already been through with regard with their partnerships with Edinburgh.
Thank you, and I think Lisa's got something to add to that. Thank you.
I was just going to clarify, obviously, you'll be aware that the Tay-Cities deal is a standalone joint committee, so therefore is obliged to have its own governance framework in place, which includes an audit function, which will be dealt with in the same as the finance function through the lead authority model, which at this point in time is Dundee. But what we're looking to do is make sure that relevant information as regards performance is filtering through to the constituent party audit committees and scrutiny committees. So we're trying to tease and work that out. But the audit function for the operations of the Tay-Cities deal committee is actually a matter for their audit function.
Thanks for that clarification, Xander.
The Head of Legal has just answered my next question, which was going to be, is there an audit function within the Tay-Cities arrangement, and would it not be appropriate for one of the other local authorities to perform the audit function on the lead authority so that they're not auditing themselves? But that was, the Head of Legal has answered my point.
Can I also just clarify that it's just the lead authority for the programming of corporate services, so all of that is provided through the lead authority model, but the other audit functions of the other committees, of the other councils, will have a role to play in shaping what that audit function looks like and how that's reported.
Thank you, Lisa, and it's useful to have the Head of Legal able to read your mind, Councillor McDade. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Donaldson.
Thanks. Yes, it is working. Can I turn to the question of, and it's quite an important point in the report we're going to be looking at later, safeguarding public money, and that's on ALIOs 2.2 to 2.4. Make just one comment. I think we've got to work out a process along with scrutiny is how we hold ALIOs to account. But I want in particular 2.4 to ask a specific question, and at the end of that it states, which has resulted in the council with Horsecross exercising its sole member company powers, including the establishment of an advisory board chaired by the Head of Culture and Community Services. I think it's quite important legally. Is the board of Horsecross now subsidiary to that advisory board, or do they still have the main responsibility, and the advisory board is just advisory?
And again, Lisa, thank you.
Just to be absolutely clear, the Horsecross board is still the Horsecross board and the governing body of Horsecross. At the moment, what we are doing is we've set up an advisory board, which was really with technical and professional specialists to help them with some of the issues that have been raised and to help them put in place a better infrastructure to ensure that the smooth management around that. So we're really looking at all the key controls around finance, health and safety, governance, workforce, IT systems, processes, and it's drawing on the expertise that are currently within the council across these professions and disciplines. We've pulled together to go in and support the Horsecross board to hopefully deliver on their own recovery plan.
Just very quickly, so the board of Horsecross have to listen very closely to any recommendations put forward by the advisory board, but they're not legally compelled to do so. Yes.
However, because we are sole member, it's a sole member trust of which the council is the sole member. If the situation could not be managed through that relationship, then obviously the sole member may take other steps. But at this stage, that's not where we are. We're working in partnership with the board to help them sustain and deliver on the recovery plan.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure it's an area this committee is going to return to and must.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions on that high-level report? No, thank you. Can we agree to note the report? Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to corporate and democratic services, welfare reform, a very important subject. They're all important, but this is particularly important and a particularly strong report. Jackie.
Thank you, Convener. This report really was, as the control objective highlights, is to ensure that the council has an understanding of the impact on welfare reform on services. We've got here today Lynn Brady, who's the service manager for revenues and benefits, and Nicholas Sutherland, who's the team leader for welfare rights and who has significant dealings with welfare reform. This is a very strong report. What the focus of this was really to look at how, as a council, we are engaging with individuals and with partner agencies in order to support those who are affected by welfare reform, and how we're feeding that into our own internal management of services which could be impacted by welfare reform. I'm happy to take any questions, or Lynn and Nicola can answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you, Jackie, and thanks to Lynn and Nicola for attending today to answer any questions or comments that the committee may have. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. Well, the first point is a comment to two colleagues who are here today. Congratulations, both on explaining this, which is a really complicated subject. You must wonder when you're waking up in the morning what changes are there going to be and how do you cope with them. But I think to get a strong report on this subject, which can be eye-watering at times, is really good. My question is about working with partner agencies such as the CAB, because there's a whole support mechanism, if we can call it that, associated with this, and could the officers maybe give their view on how well that is working, and does it need any support and help further from the council?
Lynn or Nicola, if you could use your microphone, thanks.
In terms of working with partnership agencies, we'll have lots of strong networks across the board. With CEB in particular, I think we do a complementary role with each other, and whilst we'll have the same clients or customers, it is different advice and support that's offered. We'll have regular meetings with them, etc. I would say the nature of welfare reform has increased the demand and pressure for all of us, and I'm sure CEB would see the same of us, is that it's continuing to grow, and we'll have to continue to work together to see what could be done. Is there other things that could be done? Probably, especially as universal credit gets rolled out further and managed migration takes place, which is a little bit further down the line.
Convener, that's very reassuring. Thank you.
Nicola might have someone else because she should add works for them, yeah.
Nicola, by all means, if you've got a microphone.
Do you hear me? Can you hear me okay? I was just going to add that Citizens Advice, they are delivering a service on behalf of DWP at the moment called Help to Claim, and that's to help people in their first 5 weeks when they first make a claim for universal credit. But what we're finding, and it seems like in the media perhaps, that everything's gone away now because there's this help within the first 5 weeks. What we're seeing within Welfare Fund and Welfare Rights is once the payments are in place and people are being paid their universal credit, there are a lot of deductions coming from their money. So they might have old tax credit overpayments from 2007 and it might be reducing their income like so much so that they're struggling financially and they're not able to meet their priority debts. So that's what we're starting to see. So if there was support, it would be after the 5 weeks, the first initial 5 weeks. That's maybe too detailed
No, that's very, very interesting and a good insight to get, and most concerning, I have to say.
It's also difficult because the overpayments are older. So if they're like maybe 10 years old, there's nothing to dispute. You can't dispute it. You can't go back and say, like, I want to challenge that decision because it's time barred. That you have 13 months in which to do that. And often people aren't aware that they have overpayments. So it's very complicated and it's just taken off at source.
And is there any warning of these deductions?
Yeah, but you then have to negotiate with the DWP to see if you can have them reduced. But when you reduce it, another debtor would come in. So if tax credits get in first, they'll take, or if landlord gets in, the money gets swallowed up when somebody's in a debt situation.
Or indeed the council.
Or us.
And so what tools are available to you to help with that situation?
Crisis grants, which is it's not a sustainable solution for people. It's a case of trying to negotiate with DWP or negotiate with landlords to say, look, we can pay out with the system instead of taking the money off at source. But you have to have a handle on how many people are owed the debt and then try and negotiate with each creditor for that point of view.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Wilson, do you have something to add?
I'm glad I asked the question.
So am I.
It's my first line, I think. That's pretty scary. In fact, it's very scary. And thank you for the frankness of that report. We can't sort all of that here this morning, but I think maybe yourself, convener, with Lisa might want to consider how the council could at least be appraised of that in whatever is the appropriate committee forum, and I'm not quite sure what it would be, whether it be SPNR or Housing and Communities. But if this is the face of the welfare system that seems to be defeating its own ends, right, to be blunt, then I think that's something elected members need to be aware of, first of all, and secondly, are there any things that we can do as a council to help mitigate some of the problems that's associated with that? And the third thing I think is, are we making our parliamentary colleagues aware of the difficulties that are caused by the process? Helping somebody out in the first 5 weeks, as you said, was fine. That was a major problem, but that isn't really the problem. The problem is the consequences of that. And I'm quite shocked I'm grateful for the report. So I'm just wondering if you and Lisa could put your heads together after the meeting and see what the best way forward is.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you, Councillor Wilson. This is the first I've heard of this, and I find it most concerning. I wonder if I could ask Lynn and Nicola if they would mind preparing a more detailed report on this issue with some details that can be considered. We don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction to this situation. We need to really study and understand the issues and see what this local authority can do, if anything, to help tackle that situation and manage it. Do you have anything to add, Lisa?
I was just saying that some of this is not necessarily foreseeable. It's unintended consequences of the rollout that's only just emerging. So I think what it might be helpful in first instance for this committee, if perhaps Lynn and Nicola came back and gave us a more detailed presentation on where we've got to, how, where we are at the moment, what they see as some of the challenges, what they see of things that they're managing to make work well. And then when we look at some of that, we can then decide what our next steps might be and whether that needs to go somewhere else. I will personally take it back to and raise it with EOT and CMG and let them know that this is what we've done. But I think it would be helpful for us as a committee to maybe get a bit more time in terms of development and understanding around this, so that we can then, so that we're not doing anything in a knee-jerk reaction, and we can have some clear thinking around that.
I think this is absolutely something that we all need to get our thinking caps on and try and help find solutions. But if Lynn and Nicola could come back to the next meeting, I don't think we want to sit in this for any longer than we have to. I think we need to try and get a more detailed presentation at the next meeting. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Convener. My question is in relation to part of page 4 of the report, which is page 32 of our papers. It was also acknowledged there remains a risk of reduced council tax collection levels due to increases in the level of the tax and the ongoing impact of welfare reform. Now, council tax is one of the highest collection rates of any tax, just because it's so hard to avoid. And I'm wondering if we've already started to see any evidence of issues around that since the tax went up to 4%, or is this just anticipated?
Okay, it's difficult to say because it's early stages of this financial year in terms of collection, and it's also very difficult to monitor in terms of council tax if a debt is solely due to universal credit, for example. However, probably over the last 8 months or so, we have been doing some monitoring of cases that we know are on universal credit, and some trends are emerging, although it's not the same everywhere. What we're finding is that people going on to universal credit that perhaps didn't have debt before do have debt for council tax, and that was the case last financial year, although the really good results for council tax collection masked that in terms of the overall figure. But just to give reassurance that we're continuing to monitor that, we're being both proactive and reactive, and we're changing our processes, considering how we contact people, when we contact people, and making sure our staff know to be very open-minded when negotiating repayment arrangements, especially in light of what Nicola said about the situation. And just to add in terms of the last conversation, the problems that we're having, we're ensuring that this council are raising it with relevant bodies, COSLA, Scottish Government, DWP themselves, and professional groups, just to give a bit of reassurance.
Thank you. A follow-up from Councillor McDade?
I think that's really positive that you've talked about that you are instructing staff to be flexible about it, and I think that is positive. And I think you can now pay council tax over a lot more different variations than you used to be able to, and I think given the changes that have come in terms of welfare reform, that's positive because people are getting their money in different ways as well now. And I think it would be interesting to see if you do have figures in the future about what that effect is, and whether we're seeing an effect, for example, from last year where there was 3% council tax increase to this year where there's a 4% one at the end of the year, what the council tax rate collection was, particularly affected by people on universal credit, etc. So I think that'd be quite interesting information to have.
Absolutely will do.
Thanks for that. Councillor Illingworth.
Can I make 3 comments, please?
Oh, go on then.
Quick. First of all, can I congratulate the Welfare Rights team on being accredited at the highest level? The Child Poverty Action Group produced a guide to welfare and benefits, and it's something like 1,700 pages long. It's an incredibly complex business, so congratulations. The second comment I'd like to make is about the old tax credit system. The old tax credit system was effectively an annual contract which was renewed every year round about July the 31st. And because it's an annual contract, it meant that all the facts and figures were checked once a year, and that means there was enormous scope for overpayments and underpayments, and we're still feeling that. We're still seeing the sort of hangover from that system. Hopefully, with universal credits being updated on an almost weekly basis, we're going to see less of these overpayments, but we'll have to wait and see. And my third comment was that I'm not entirely convinced that we're seeing the audit. This is discussing the audit processes as an audit committee, and I'm not entirely convinced that audit committee is a great place to discuss the pros and cons of welfare reform, but only to discuss, well, is it being properly audited? So, but thank you for that.
I hear what you say, Councillor Illingworth, but what I would say is that, you know, as per the initial discussion, there's not really a natural home for this type of discussion. But what I would say is that, you know, it is important that we ensure that as a local authority, and you know, this is something that this committee is responsible for, that we as a local authority are being seen to do everything that we can to assist people who are in financial difficulties as a result of any transition in universal credit or any introduction in a new system. And I take on board what you say about the tax credit system in years gone by. I do take that on board, but I still think it's a valid issue for this committee to consider, and I think Lisa would like to comment also.
I think that's the key point. You're absolutely correct, Councillor Illingworth, that we're not here to debate the pros and cons of policy per se, particularly in terms of this paper. This committee's task, however, is to identify and flush out risk, and if there is a potential strategic risk emerging as a result of a national policy or a piece of legislation, then I do think that is appropriate for this particular committee to look at. But it would be focused on the risk and what we can then do to mitigate and manage that risk. It wouldn't be a debate about the pros and cons of the legislation.
Indeed, thanks for that, Lisa.
Great, thank you.
Okay, that you. Councillor Williamson, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a number of questions. The first one is, I firmly believe that this system is set up to fail, and I feel that it because of that, it is putting maybe the council at some sort of risk because of that, with clients failing to apply for it. But I was just wondering about the number of appeals cases we actually get over and above this. Are we seeing a steady rise in the number of appeals that we're actually facing at the moment?
Not in terms of universal credit.
No.
Similar to tax credits in that there are very limited set of circumstances where you can appeal, because like Councillor Illingworth said, underpayments and overpayments are a natural part of it, just like in tax credits. So you're not able to dispute, you're not able to challenge them in the same way as you can the legacy benefits.
Sorry, could I maybe just add with regards to appeals? Last financial year, the welfare rights team in general for the welfare benefits managed to overturn 3 out of 4 appeals in the favour of the customers, a 75% success rate, which was really good in the circumstances. Not so good for customers and whatever in the process, but good outcome at the end.
I think it just highlights what I was trying to say about it. It seems like it's set up to fail. If you're having to deal with, you know, the 75 customers who potentially would have done without money if the answer has been successful in the claims.
What I would say, the fact that you're unable to challenge makes it even, the fact that you're unable to challenge some of the decisions makes it more difficult for people. Does that make sense? That there is nothing to challenge, which means they have to kind of accept their lot.
The other one was about, you know, getting access to the welfare rights and the work that you're doing, which is, I feel, tremendous work that you're doing. But I still feel there's a compartmentalised system there whereby we've got the elderly who feel that they're not entitled to anything, so they've potentially failing to apply for this stuff, and I think it's how do we address that problem, and through the work that you're doing and basically giving more exposure. Also, the in-work poverty that we're currently seeing as well is, again, how do we get access to people so that we can put them into the system so that they are aware of what benefits they can actually appeal for.
Not sure if that was a question at all, but it's more of a comment. But thank you for your observation. Councillor Donald, sorry. Okay, hang on a second. Lisa, I would like to. Oh, sorry, Lynn. Beg your pardon.
Yeah, sorry. It was just in response to your comment about elderly and work poverty, etc. The welfare rights team are small. However, we're doing our very best to ensure that we're getting out to as many places as we possibly can. Spread the word, making sure that the front line everywhere, at the very least, know when to signpost and where to signpost, and quite often give a little bit of first-tier information and advice. And it is working, not just within the council, but with partner organisations, NHS. We've got champions everywhere, and we're identifying them all the time in schools. So we're going to continue to do that. But it is difficult to reach everybody, but we'll keep on the go with that.
You used to go to Nine Wells, is that and do a pop-up, excuse me, a pop-up kind of like shop in Nine Wells Hospital. Is that still on the go, or is that being done from Dundee?
It's been done from Dundee. So Dundee do the first point of contact work, and if there's any casework as a result of that, they then pass it to the teams. So Dundee Welfare Rights are doing, but there's very few. We see, because it's primarily Macmillan work, so that's cancer. We provide an enhanced service to people that are affected by cancer. We have a weekly drop-in at Cornhill. So every Wednesday we've got somebody there, but we speak to cancer nurse specialists all the time. It's like painting the Forth Road Bridge. We keep going back and saying to them, refer to us, money's important, keep talking about it, and we get loads of referrals in without having to have an actual physical presence.
Thank you for that, and if I could just again, sorry, remind you to use your microphone. I don't think it was it on? I do apologise. Councillor Donaldson.
Okay, I'm not always fulsome in my praise, but I actually think it's quite an excellent report, and congratulations. I also think, and not look forward, but the next audit committee, I think it's 26th of June, I think it's important that we do consider the issues that have been raised. And this is not a question because we are non-political, but a party political, but it is a question of how you deliver services, advice in as humane and as decent a manner as possible, as civilised a manner as possible. And the risk here is one, it's a reputational risk matter, and it's something we've got to factor in. I've got two specific questions. One, compared to, let us say, even 2 years ago when a lot of us were elected as new councillors, what are the staffing levels within your team, given the whole raft of changes that have come about? And do you have enough in terms of capacity to be able to deliver? And it's just a blunt assessment. The second point is you have quarterly meetings with the DWP. Now, Lynn mentioned you've got a 75% success rate in appeals. However, those appeals are in Dundee, in Kirkcaldy, in Stirling, but not here in Perth. And I can imagine that adds an immense amount of stress to what you do, and also to the people that, the underlying, citizens who have to go to these appeals. It's not such a problem if, let's say, somebody lives in Invergowrie, they can go to Dundee, so on and so forth. But for the vast bulk in Perth and Kinross, why can't at least a significant number of those appeals be held here in Perth? Or is this just the way it's always been? Thanks. So staffing and appeals.
I'll do staffing levels if that's okay. Over the last couple of years, like most places in the council, we've had to make savings throughout the whole revenues and benefits service, and we've had to do the same as everybody else. So our workload has increased significantly and our staffing levels have gone down. Despite that, in terms of results and contacts and outcomes, we've exceeded targets, etc. going forward and at the present time, especially in terms of the welfare rights impact, welfare reform impact on our customers and other frontline services, we anticipate that there will be more demand and pressure. There's no doubt about that. I think that's recognised widely throughout the United Kingdom. So not just in terms of resource for staff, but in terms of our budgets. For example, the Scottish Welfare Fund budget is constantly under significant pressure. We're constantly only paying out on high priority. And also in terms of the new child poverty statutory duties, there's likely to be more workload and demand for a key role for welfare rights staff. And we're working jointly with other people in the council and our finance colleagues to consider what pressures and solutions are available going forward.
Tribunal venue in Perth and Kinross it's up to courts and tribunal service, so there's nothing we can do. We've raised it before, we've tried to influence them to have a venue in Perth and Kinross, but because in Kirkcaldy it's a church, same in Dunfermline. They're no purpose built, so they can pop up anywhere, but there's reluctance for some reason.
It's really just to try and make things better for both yourself and citizens. It's just a complete refusal to hold tribunals here in Perth. Is that just because that's the way it's always been done, or is there some other reason? It just seems.
I don't know. I would have to ask them. But what I would say is we changed the way, like when demand started to go up, we changed the way we worked to make best use of resources. So previously, we would have, everybody would represent their own cases. So if you had 4 appeals in Dundee one morning and it was 4 different workers for 4 different people, 4 different workers would go through, which didn't make sense. So now we have one representative irrespective of whose case it belongs to, either for a full day or a half session, which makes it tricky as well, because then the customer's like, well, I've not had consistency. If the tribunal doesn't fall in their favour, they then want to make it the excuse that it was a representative didn't know my case. So it invites other things that we have to then manage. But we basically have redesigned the service to make best use of resources, because that's what you have to do when you have less staff. Does that help?
Yes, it does, and I think it's something we ought to be pushing more on, because I think it would alleviate a lot of the pressures upon yourself. It just seems so logical, given the size of Perth and Kinross, of Perth, you can have appeals here. It does puzzle me. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I do agree with you, Councillor Donaldson, and I think if there's anything that the council can do to add weight to any requests for more local venues to be used, then I think we should look at ways to do that if we can. Are there any further questions? No. Okay. Once again, thank you both for what you've done, and look forward to seeing you again next month. Thanks very much. Oh, and thanks to you as well, Jackie. Okay, at this point, I want to hand over the chair to Councillor Donaldson in respect of item 5.2.
Thank you, Convener. I think this is the first full session I've chaired in council committees, apart from Grief Common Good Fund. So hopefully you won't give me too difficult a time, but I most strongly encourage you to ask questions. And in particular on this report, which is another strong report. But could I ask Jackie, first of all, to make some comments?
Thank you, Convener. This report is concentrated on the Council's responsibility for the implementation of the Carers Act, which is a joint responsibility between ourselves and the NHS. The IJB will have significant interest in this report also, and within our report sharing protocols, we'll get the opportunity to consider this report in due course. This was very much of a targeted piece of work looking at how the legislation is being implemented and the actions that are being undertaken to implement it and to continue with its implementation. The controls are assessed as being strong, as there are very strong arrangements in place and oversight to ensure that the Act is implemented by the Council and in conjunction with its partners. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Also, are there any council officers here who'd like to make a comment? No. Right. Well, I've got several questions, but I'd like first of all to hear questions from Councillor Wilson.
I didn't want to disappoint you, Convener, Acting Convener. It's the same kind of question as before, because a lot of this is doing with partnership working, and we received from the report the key partner in this is PCAVs in terms of the carers. I mean, the evidence here is that there's strong internal controls, but that tells us the audity bit, if I can put it that way. That's audit, but not the other audit. But is in terms of partnership working with PCAVs, and I think this is reflected in the report, is that working as well as we want it to? Was that part of the audit? And if it wasn't, how do we find how that, as a council, how that's working out? Because that's key to the whole process.
Thank you, Councillor. I didn't look at how the council as a whole is relating with PCAVs. This audit was very much for this particular project. And for this particular project, there was very strong connections with PCAVs in order to deliver and implement the requirements of this Act. I mean, you should hopefully see that through the reports that that PCAVs is very much of a partner in this. And is able to signpost people our way and to provide support for carers, both young and adult carers, which should be reflected in the report. So for this specific area, the partnership working was strong.
Anyone else? Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, I was just wondering what sort of work is being done on the early intervention. Who's taking responsibility for that? Is that the duty of the council, or is that to the duty of PCAVs?
Jackie.
I need to look at the legislation again just to see whose legal responsibility it is. But the board with oversight for the project has seen all elements of this right the way through. And has identified not necessarily who has legal responsibility, but who can actually facilitate delivery. And with the partnership working, it has been working.
Lisa.
Just to clarify, Councillor Williamson, the statutory duty is on the council, but how the council discharges that duty, it can make its own arrangement to do so, which is why we look at working with PCAVs to do certain parts of it. But in terms of the duty to make sure that that's done, it sits with the council.
Anyone else? Okay, I want to just make one or two comments. I think it's a strong report, but I think it's a preliminary report because it's in the sense that the legislation only came into effect on the 1st of April last year. So this is looking at specific requirements that, that the legislation is in place. But next time round, it's going to be a question on the delivery. And one thing I do notice, and it's not being negative, but we've got 41% of carers who responded to the Health and Clinical Excellence Survey. That's in 2017-18, feel supported to continue in their caring role. And that's above the Scottish average of 37%. So that's commendable, but 59% hence don't feel supported or they feel neutral. So it's not entirely positive. What I do want to ask is, I'm not clear on PCAVs, and I was looking at PCAVs Carers Hub, how much they are responsible for the delivery compared to council officers. But one thing I do want to ask, and that's on young carers, and that's 18 and under. Are we planning to do an internal audit report on young carers, which come under Education and Children's Services? Because I think it's an area we've got to consider as well.
A couple of responses to convener. This is looking at the implementation of the Act. Yeah. So therefore, yes, you're right, it is early stages. Yeah. Any future work would be looking at the outcomes that have come from that implementation and how how that's developed. So really, this was looking at how we were implementing. So you're correct on that. With regard to looking specifically at young carers, that would certainly be included in any conversations going forward. It's not been specifically identified as a high risk area on its own at this point, but it's certainly something that I can look at as to how Education and Children's Services are looking at supporting young carers.
Anyone want to follow up on? I would just say, I think it may not be identified as high risk, but I don't think you can look at the position on adult carers, and we're obviously going to come back, let's say in a year's time or so on, with a follow-up report. But I think we've got to factor in young carers as well. I think that's important. Right, no further comments. I shall pass back to. Can you agree to note the report, everyone? And it is a very good report. Can I pass back to the convener?
Thanks, Stuart. I do appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 6, which is further follow-up on financial assessment and charging. Again, Jackie, can you give a few comments, please?
Thank you, convener. Yes, this is the further follow-up from an internal audit on financial assessment and charging. Yeah, you'll recall that you've had updates on this audit report before. The background section lays out the history for this assignment. The original piece of work, the original audit, took place back in 2016 and found a significant scope for improvements. Then there's been detailed follow-up work since, which has resulted in some further areas of concern about the areas not being fully addressed. However, this report is a more positive report, and it does provide some assurance about the sustainability of the agreed actions. What I will say, and I'd like to raise with council, is that this is not an audit of financial assessment and charging. This is not a whole-scale audit. This is looking at specific actions which were agreed back in 2016 for a specific, following an audit, but it doesn't look at any changes that has been undertaken within the team within that time. So it really is very specific, and I'd like council just to be aware of that. Fiona Lowe, who is the service manager for within the team, is here to answer any other questions that you might have. And I will also answer any questions as well.
Thanks, Jackie, and bearing in mind these comments about the scope of this particular paper, are there any questions? Councillor McDade.
Thank you, convener. It's in the appendix and it's on page 51 of our papers. It's 5.2 and it's talking about service will document the annual review procedures and ensure that an audit trail and control checks are implemented. Should any historic cases be highlighted, relevant action will be taken. So it was no in September 2017 and June 2018, and it's now in part February 2019. And it talks about service advisors or draft procedure for staff, but this has to be updated in line with a recent decision taken by the Charging Governance Board regarding unit cost uplift and direct interaction update with the DWP system. So, and it says there is evidence of discussion and awareness of issues surrounding the annual billing at the Charging Board. So I'm sort of querying when we're likely to see this fully implemented.
Yes, we've just completed the annual reassessment exercise this year, which was further complicated by tying in with the implementation of Frank's Law. So that's just been completed, and we're pulling together a lessons learned report to see what else we need to change from our procedures at that point. And we'll link in with Jackie to make sure that she's comfortable with what we've got there. What I will say is the procedure will change again next year, because we're looking to implement mobile financial assessment. So that will again have an impact. So we'll tie off this area, but we will be moving forward and improving things for next year.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, and thanks for that earlier response. And it's kind of follow on from Councillor McDade's point, because it's my lack of understanding of the subject. And this, if the last one was eye-watering, I think this one's even more eye-watering. But on page 51, it says at the bottom of the column with all the text in it, there is evidence of discussion and awareness of issues surrounding annual billing at the charging board. Right? How do we take, if there's evidence there of the discussion, how do we take that forward? I take your point about Frank's Law and the need to integrate that into the process, and was aware of that. But if it's just really, what does that mean, and how do we take that issue forward? If there's an awareness, that's fine, but how do we turn that into an outcome?
Reassessment's a very fluid process. We're very dependent on information coming from other sources, such as Scottish Government. So our timetable has to be fluid and moves as we're doing it. So a lot of decisions on how we change processes and try to improve things went through the Charging Governance Board. So decisions were taken, and then our priority was to actually put them in place and make sure that we managed to get the 3,000 invoices and information out to people that were affected by non-residential charges. So it's just making sure we then update that, and anything that we could do better, have that further discussion and take that in place for next time. And that will go back to the board for final sign-off.
If Lisa can come in as well.
I think, councillors, I sit on that board, as does Stuart Mackenzie, as does Jackie. So there's a degree of assurance around that. I think the point about putting that bit in was we weren't blindsided by a shift or a slight delay. It was a managed delay given the implementation of Frank's Law and everything else that was going on at that time. I think the key important here is that there wasn't a risk that we hadn't seen, and we hadn't, and that the service wasn't anticipating. They were managing that risk. So for the bit about the discussion, there's been quite extensive discussion about how we've prioritised what work the service is doing, and the biggest priority for us at the moment was making sure that the annual bills went out as quickly as possible and reflected any changes as a result of Frank's Law, which was no mean feat in terms of working out all the calculations to do that. So the bit about the board and the discussion at the board is really to give you a degree of assurance that the people that might have been worried about something like this were all sitting on the board and supporting the progress that was being made and the implementation plan that was being rolled out. Now that that's been done, the priority now is let's look at how we improve things, let's look at the structure, let's look at what we're doing, let's look at what we need to do for next year to make sure that our service and our processes and our systems are designed to manage that as effectively as they possibly can.
Thank you.
Councillor Williamson, did you have a query? No, sorry. Okay. Councillor Illingworth.
Just a quick comment. I think this report evidences the value of internal audit, and it gives a clear evidence of how it benefits the running of the organisation. We've got a situation which is less than ideal, and it looks to be largely solved. So congratulations to all involved.
Appreciate these comments. Any further questions? No? Okay, can we agree to note this report? Thank you. Moving on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the Internal Audit Annual Report for 2018-19. And again, Jackie, can I ask you to comment, please?
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, this is the year-end report for 2018-19, which summarises basically what's been brought before you within the last year. So there's not a lot of new information in there, but it's just putting things together so that you can see it as a snapshot. What I would particularly like to draw your attention to is what is set out in section 7, which is the Chief Internal Auditor's opinion. And as you can see there's reasonable reliance can be placed on the risk management, governance and internal control systems. There's been a lot of work undertaken on risk management this year, which is now reflected within that opinion with regard to the rollout of the strategy and the implementation of risk management, moving on to being embedded within services. So that reasonable assurance is a good thing. That is what that's very good in internal audit speak. The only other thing I'd really like to highlight for you is we've had the external quality assessment on internal audit this year, which you've seen the report from that, and there's a couple of areas in section 6.11 which have been taken forward as future developments within the year to come. But other than that, I'm happy to take any questions or any comments on the annual report.
Okay, thanks for that, Jackie. And I think we're gradually getting used to the audit language as you describe, and reasonable is good. So strong, that welfare reform report must be very, very strong. So we're getting that, thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Comment first, if we start with audit speak in this committee, then we've lost it, convener. That's the auditors that do that. On page 58, 2.11, it's just the proportion of strong and moderately strong related control objectives. And there's been a change in these, obviously. Would Jackie like to comment a bit more on that? I mean, the subjects are varied and they're different, so comparing year by year isn't always an exact science, because you maybe have a pile of apples in one bowl and a pile of oranges in another one before somebody makes that point. But as an overall trend, we obviously, your comment, convener, we want to have strong controls, or very strong controls. But was that just because of the nature of the reports we had, or does it give us any cause for concern, and is it something we should be looking at?
I think what I would just say firstly on that is that for example the fact that there are a reduced number of actions is quite probably a good thing, but also I think looking at the profile of the risks, etc., I think it shows improved focus of the audit effort on areas that are of concern, I think. But I'd ask Jackie to comment from her perspective as well.
Thank you for the question. You're right in saying that different things looked at each year, so we are in some ways comparing apples and on oranges. But this really just gives you a bit of a flavour of a trend. And trends do go up and down. Compared with the previous year, we're quite similar to the year before last. And there was a couple of specific audit reports where one where there was a moderately weak control objective which was brought before you, and a couple of moderates where there was areas that really did need to improve. The fact that there are fewer actions means that it's a bit more targeted, so that services can just undertake specific actions to significantly increase the controls within their areas. What I will also say is that as an organisation, we need to be a little bit more smart on what is good enough. Having very strong controls is great, but we also need to have the conversation about whether we can afford very strong controls in all areas. So it may well be that moderately strong in some areas, not health and safety or anything significant, but whether moderately strong is actually good enough, bearing in mind the financial constraints and the environment that we're working in. So that's just another area that the committee could perhaps think about. It doesn't give me any massive concern at the moment, the areas that we're looking at and the trends, but it is something that I do keep an eye on over the years. But there are fluctuations, and I just see this as a little fluctuation this year based on a couple of specific projects.
Okay, thanks. I think Lisa would like to come in as well.
It was just to explain to councillors, obviously I look at this report as well when I'm shaping up the annual governance statement, which will be coming to you at the next committee with the draft annual accounts. And from my looking at that, I think the things that we need to take out from that is that there was one moderately weak, no weeks, no unacceptably weak, which I think is from a risk base. And you've got to bear in mind that our audit plans are risk-based, so we're looking at areas where we think there may be risk. So therefore, the feedback from that, around that, is actually really quite a positive and a good news story. I think the point that Jackie makes about what's good enough is actually really important. We have increasing demand for services. People are doing more with less. We perhaps would love to have super duper technical systems, but we don't have the money necessarily to invest in everything that we might want. So we're doing things in a way that makes do in certain areas. And that's the importance of embedding the risk strategy. That's the importance of getting the people who are actually delivering the services and doing the stuff on the ground, getting them to understand what risk is, getting them to be realistic about what acceptable risk is, and being absolutely clear about what unacceptable risks are, and putting in place the right processes to manage that. I think what this does, and together with the self-assessment work that's come out from the annual governance statement, which will be before you at the next meeting, we're managing risk really well. We're not perfect, and we can't absolutely manage risk because that is impossible. You cannot mitigate and manage all risk. You cannot create an organisation which is risk-free. And actually, as we move to change and evolve and develop, we need to be more risk-aware and be able to see the opportunities that perhaps some situations present in terms of being able to adapt and evolve and change. So I think you may start getting more observations, perhaps a few more moderates, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that actually means that the people who are charged with managing the risks, and that will include you, are actually doing this properly and being realistic and pragmatic in terms of the climate that we're operating in. Sorry for that rant.
That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor McDade.
Yeah, just a couple of sort of comments, and I think it's positive to see the FTE has gone up this year in terms of resourcing. I think that's something the committee, since I joined, expressed repeatedly, and we did see a bit of issues around that last year, and I know they've been supported by the Head of Legal and Governance in that through the last year, and I think it's been demonstrated in the output that we've seen this year, I would say. I think we've seen stuff coming on time pretty much all the time, and it's the churn has started to really come through, which is positive. Very much echo what Jackie said about what's an acceptable level of risk and what the Head of Legal has just outlined in terms of, I think, and I was thinking about this when we were discussing one of the papers earlier, as the council moves towards embedding transformation, as it were, and change within the core of the organisation, and the Chief Executive has been very passionate about her proposed Think Yes agenda and the Perth and Kinross offer. And what occurred to me was really that as part of that, we should be embedding risk awareness into staff, because that's critical to that. For that to work, staff need to be thinking about what are the risks of the decisions that I'm taking at these levels, where you haven't necessarily got the same levels of checks and balances that you have currently built into quite rigid systems. Actually, that's a positive thing. So I think that from my point of view, there is a bit of a shift change there that will come as part of that. and that we do have to maybe embed this. And I think it comes to us as elected members as well, that we need to be thinking about having risk as a higher priority on our thinking when we're looking at papers. What are the risks here? In fact, we should be thinking about it more often than others, probably. So I would just echo what both the head of legal and the chief internal auditor have said on that front. I think it is a very good report. Generally, I think that the reason I was going to ask the question, Jackie, about what reasonable, reliance meant, but apparently that means very good. So it's good to know that we've got very good. But I think that really is a positive thing that we can take out. There's a good news story.
Thank you. And Lisa, do you want to come in again?
It was just picking up on the point about, in terms of the thinking around risk for this committee. The Strategic Risk Register is being refreshed on the back of your assessment and the annual governance self-assessment and the workshops that have occurred across all of the services. So that revised Strategic Risk Register will be coming to this committee. But I think what I was going to do was I was going to suggest that that was perhaps done as more of a development session where we can almost workshop our thinking around risk and how our strategic risks might impact on the type of things that you might want to see some consultancy work being done on, and how that might evolve, how we look at these reports and what we do with them, and where we take maybe any concerns or considerations or thoughts that we might have around some of that.
I think it would be very positive. I think actually sort of wider awareness amongst the elected members about thinking about risk. We get a lot of opportunities to attend training and workshops, and actually probably one of the most important ones that we should have is risk training. And we did do this with the Integrated Joint Board, actually, those who are members of the IJB, and it was a very helpful exercise. It can be quite basic to start with, but actually it does make you think, and it starts making you break down other aspects of it. So I think it'd be positive if some workshops are potentially run for not just us but the wider membership.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Any further comments? Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah. Can I just echo Councillor McDade's comments? Clearly, it's been of great help this year for the internal audit to be back to being fully staffed. I think that has been reflected in the output we've seen. People talking a lot about risk, and I think risk registers is something I certainly find helpful. And it's not just about the likelihood of a risk, it's about the magnitude of that risk. But risk per se is not a bad thing, and also you can, with a higher level of risk, as long as you've got the right judgment and you can assess it, you can get a better return. Two things I want to ask. First of all, on whistleblowing, just to ask both Jackie and Lisa that we're satisfied with the arrangements we have in place are entirely anonymous and confidential. In the space of a year, there's been 3 contacts compared to 4 last year. How does that compare with other local authorities, if you're able to respond? And with those contacts, were any, were they of substance? Were they, lead to changes or what?
I don't actually know. I've not done any benchmarking with other authorities on the number of whistleblowing disclosures that are made. That's something I perhaps look at within the year and see and take that forward. So the second part of the question was anything significant. Obviously, if there were any matters that were raised that would have affected the control environment or the governance or risk management, then this committee would have been informed of them, and that is the case going forward. That if there is anything like that, then this committee will receive a report on that. It won't as an additional piece of work. Obviously, it would not give the details of the whistleblowing allegations, but it would really concentrate on the improvements in control that have been identified. There's been no requirement for any reports of that nature to come to this committee. I don't know whether that helps in answering that question.
Okay, thank you.
Can I do one follow-up question? Right. And that's specifically, and I suppose it's my own background in financial services. where the Financial Conduct Authority just about insisted every employee had proper money laundering training. But what training do we have in place in the Council on the issue of money laundering?
There is general training that's available for fraud and corruption. Specific money laundering training, there hasn't been much this year, but I have recently attended a course myself on money laundering specific to local authorities. There's not a requirement for local authorities to have a money laundering reporting officer, but there has been recent training there, and as part of the refresh of the fraud and corruption strategy, there will be something that comes out of that which will be available for staff as well.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? No. Can we agree to note that report also? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to hand over again to Councillor Donaldson in relation to the next item on the agenda, but can I just say at the start here that this is safeguarding public money. Are you getting it right? This is possibly among the most important things that we need to look at as a committee, and I would be hoping that the colleagues would support a comprehensive look at this paper in some form of development session before the summer recess. But I can ask Stuart to have an initial debate at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I think actually I circulated this to all members of this committee about 6-8 weeks ago, not long after it came out, and it did strike me as a report. It really is thorough, it's detailed, there's a whole range of checklists, but I just don't think it's a report we can just take today on its own, look at it, discuss it, and then almost kind of file it away. It's not that kind of document. It's a document, it's an ongoing document. I certainly think there would be clear benefits from us to have a proper development session. Whether we do that on our own right or in conjunction with scrutiny, and there obviously are overlaps between scrutiny and audit, but it is not just purely either about controls and processes. It's also about partnership working. It's about, for instance, with ALIOs, we do need to know the financial strength of these organisations. But before I turn to members of this committee, Jackie and Lisa, do you want to make any comments on this report?
My comments really would be that I was grateful that you've sent it out at quite an early stage to the committee, but I certainly had every intention of it being considered properly, as informally, and so that you could make a decision on how you want to take this forward. It's a very easy read, and it's very straightforwardly written, which is of a real benefit, so that we can get something out of this by looking at all the issues that are raised, by using the checklists and assessing ourselves against the report. And I think it's something that would be really beneficial for us as officers to support elected members in doing that. Really, how you want to do it, whether it is a standalone, whether it's joint with scrutiny or wider still, that's open for debate, but it is something that I think we do need to take very seriously, and it's an ideal opportunity and a perfect document to do that with.
Lisa?
Yeah, I think when the document was published, our immediate thought was this would be the substance of a development session with you. I think there is some merit in doing it with scrutiny. I think looking at two sides of that in terms of value for money performance and risk associated with that, I think there is some merit, but we wouldn't be precious if other elected members wanted to come along and do that. I do think it's something that would warrant spending a wee bit of time. So I think a standalone development session, you know, at a date that would suit you, where we can definitely invite scrutiny committee, but open it up to anybody else who wants to attend, and do some structured workshopping around this. And it may well be that that will then shape what our priorities for further development will be throughout the year. And I think it would also be a good idea if, as an audit committee, we actually tried to formulate some sort of structured development plan for the committee over the year, which we can either do things that are pertinent just to us, or things we might want to do together with the scrutiny committee to make sure that we're getting the best value out of training and development sessions that we can put together. And these can be tailored around what you see as your key priorities and areas for development. But I think that this paper in particular would help us do the exercise to set the groundwork for that as to what some of your further development might be.
Thank you very much. I broadly agree with that, but I'd be interested to hear the opinions of others on the audit committee. I think also today, I think it would be helpful just to get initial observations on the contents of this document. It's, what, 40 pages long, and it may well be that there are certain things that we haven't been covering sufficiently over the last year, 2 years. Who knows? And I think it would be helpful just to get observations, and we can then feed them into any development session. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yeah, I think that obviously this should be part of a development session. I actually think that there should be a general development session for all councillors on the sort of headlines of this, and then a much more comprehensive one that is targeted towards the Audit Committee and Scrutiny Committee jointly. And actually, I would suggest that we invite the council nominees of the Integration Joint Board, the ALIOs, as well as key strategic bodies that pose significant risk to the council. But I think it should be broken down into two parts, really. One that's a general elected member briefing, and a much more comprehensive one for audit scrutiny, where there are certain questions that we should be asking, and that development session can focus on. I absolutely agree we should have a development programme that runs all year round, and I think that's a positive discussion. I think we started to have some of those discussions after the last audit committee, and I think that's positive, and I know that the chair has indicated their interest in bringing that sort of stuff forward, so I think that's positive. From my point of view, I think this is too comprehensive a document to have a full proper discussion about the now, but I think that actually having those development sessions sooner rather than later, and I also think it should just be embedded as an annual sort of thing for all elected members regardless. And I think we get a lot of development sessions on lots of different things, and perhaps some of the wood gets lost for the trees, and I think this is really a key thing that we should be getting regularly.
Elisa.
I think picking up on the discussions, the development discussions that we had just a month or so back about how we can further evolve and develop the role of this committee, and how that can work and dovetail with the work that goes on in the scrutiny committee, so that we've got a more holistic view of risk and performance around that, across the whole organisation. I think that a part of that, and part of the discussions about how we develop the committee and how scrutiny is developing as well, is about embedding some sort of formal training and development programme across the piece to make sure that what we're not doing is giving you things that, well, we think might be helpful to you. I think it's really important that you shape that and say, well, what sort of things do you think would be helpful to you as well? There will be certain things that we will signpost and we will suggest, but I think that a preliminary discussion around this flows quite naturally from the discussions that we had about developing the audit committee further. So I think that we can look at plotting that out quite sensibly, and also looking at what sorts of papers and reports are coming to you at certain points in the year, so that we can make sure that we're tailoring your development around that, so that you can make the most informed comments around that, and be able to give these a proper assessment.
Eric, I think you wanted to make some comments.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. So I just wanted to support something that Councillor McDade said. you know, yes, we absolutely, the direction of travel here is to look at ways in which scrutiny and audit can work together, although they are separate and they have separate responsibilities. There are areas of collaboration. But I think what we've seen, is what I've seen in the 2 years or so as an elected member, is that whilst you know we are specialising in this area, all elected members need to buy into to what we're trying to do here, and I think that an early stage in the process ought to be involving all 40 elected members rather than just us and scrutiny.
Anyone else? Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. I welcome the report. I welcome the layout of it. You're right, it's a fairly straightforward read. I don't think it's an easy read, but straightforward read. Totally support the idea of development sessions, whether we do them in 2 bits or whatever. I'm kind of happy to go with the flow in that. The difficult bit will be going through the checklists, as we're asked to do, and then saying, well, where is the evidence to support a yes to that question? Because we will need to look, and we'll need help with saying, well, where is, if the question, does the council have sound reasons for having a representative on a partnerships board, right? What are the reasons, and do we have a person on that? I'm just picking one out of thin air on 1 page. So I think that will be the meaty bit, and the difficult bit is having to produce evidence to support, and I guess our colleagues and friends and external auditors might be interested in this as well, because this could be a bit of good practice that you could disseminate around Scotland, and tell them how excellent Perth and Kinross are and what they do. Never miss an opportunity, Convener. But seriously, I do think that that'll be the bit that needs the digging, and that's going to take some members' time and some officers' time as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Anyone else on the committee? Okay. What I'm going to propose at the moment is that we do note the contents of this report, but it's an ongoing process. I think we need to work out, I think we need a broad approach that will include all members of the council, because they are also responsible in their own ways for audit and for scrutiny on the committees they serve on and such like. And then you perhaps take a more rifle approach, going a bit further forward. I would just make one other comment myself, and I think it's unfortunate with SIPFA that they used to do a manual for councils on accounting terms and accounting concepts, and I wish there was a bit more in terms of training on basic accounting procedures for councils, because a very important part of our role is to go through the annual report and accounts for the council, and that is something specifically that we do and scrutiny does not. But for the moment, I'm proposing that we note the contents of this report, and that we also will return to it at various points over coming months. Is that agreed? Thank you. I hand back to.
Thanks, Stuart. And flowing seamlessly on from your final comments there regarding annual accounts, etc., move on to the final item on today's agenda, which is the interim management report and our audit status summary by our external auditors, KPMG, and we also have Mr Mackenzie, returned hot foot from the dentist, to join us today to comment as necessary. So can I hand over? Is it Michael? Is it? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe just on the last point there in respect of training on financial statements, KPMG's provided some training to the committee members before, and happy to do so again on what our perspective would be in terms of key areas of focus for the committee and some aspects of financial statements, maybe jointly with colleagues in finance. Just on our paper then, I'll just briefly summarise some of the key matters that are contained within it.
Our audit broadly covers 4 phases in the year. We have planning and interim review, which focuses largely on controls, the year-end substantive testing of the results included in the financial statements, and then our completion and reporting activities. This report follows the completion of our interim testing, so that's predominantly controls focused. And we look at providing an update in respect of those areas we set out in our plan as areas of significant risk or other focus. Largely, our conclusions are satisfactory in respect of a broad range of controls that we've tested, and that's consistent with our findings in prior years. There are a couple which I would draw to your attention, which are raised as new recommendations within this report. The first is in respect of valuation of fixed assets, where there's an element of judgment in terms of the valuations included in the financial statements, and we note that our work in that area is predominantly contained to the year end. Management have commissioned independent valuations of selected fixed assets this year, and we will continue to use our own specialists to support our challenge of management's valuations. And the second is a recommendation in respect of the reconciliation of the housing rent system with the general ledger. That wasn't being carried out on the monthly basis that is expected within the council, but an overall reconciliation will be carried out for the year-end position, and we'll review that as part of our year-end procedures. Within our report, we also draw attention to some of our wider scope responsibilities and emerging matters. So in wider scope, this year the Council has a best value audit. That will be a separate report issued by Audit Scotland and the Accounts Commission. It goes to the Accounts Commission on the 8th of August, and we've now substantially completed our field work in respect of that review, and the next steps will be to provide the Council with a draft of the report before it goes to the Accounts Commission and then is likely presented back to a relevant committee of the Council. And we also draw attention to an emerging matter in respect of loans fund accounting. Perhaps just to give a bit of background, and then maybe Stuart will want to add a perspective from the Council specifically. Loans fund accounting is a mechanism within the financial statements that relates to how the Council reflects the charges associated with borrowing on an annual basis. The legislation changed in 2016, and there is some ongoing debate, it's fair to say, between Audit Scotland and local authorities in respect of whether that legislation applies only prospectively for new loans advances from 2016 or can be applied retrospectively to loans that had already been previously advanced. Some local authorities had already reprofiled retrospectively in their financial statements in the prior year. Perth and Kinross did not, but is considering reprofiling in this year's financial statements. Audit Scotland's current position is that you cannot reprofile loans which were advanced prior to 2016, but a group of councils, including Perth and Kinross, have taken independent legal advice from QC, which is contrary to that view. And at this current point in time, we're in discussions with Audit Scotland, who are also seeking their own legal advice. So what I would say is that is an area which will be subject to some judgment and which we'll be reporting on in our annual audit report. The only other thing in our report is a follow-up on prior year recommendations. So I'll maybe just stop there and take questions, or if Stuart has anything to add.
I don't know if Stuart, you want to add anything on that substantive point that that Michael was making there, just from your perspective.
Thanks, Fraser. Thank you, convener. I think Mr. Walker has summarised the points very eloquently. In terms of loans fund accounting, the council has sought independent legal advice, and I think my colleague Mr. Simpson will invite her to comment very briefly on that, and then maybe comment more widely on the implications for our final accounts.
Councillors, I think the important bit to remember is that there is no question that the reprogramming or the proposed reprogramming wouldn't satisfy the definition of prudent accounting practice, which is the clear thing. The debate is a very technical legal nicety, which means poor Stuart has been subjected to me and another colleague ranting endlessly about the superiority of legislation versus statutory guidance versus advice notes versus technical bulletins. And it's fair to say that he just put his head on the table and let us get on with it. There is a legal debate about whether or not we can use the current legislation. Our legal opinion is that the legislation, there was no transitional provisions, there was nothing, so we can't be bound by legislation that has now been revoked, which the current legislation has done in terms of the old provision. The debate is around a statement, a single line almost, in statutory guidance, which we think goes beyond the extent of the primary legislation. And I'm very thankful that 2 senior QCs have agreed with the view that we have taken. But I think the important thing for us is that in terms of the accounting practice, leaving aside the legal niceties, the actual number crunching and what's been done, there's no suggestion that there's any of that is improper. It's just whether or not we're allowed to follow the new rules or we're bound by the old rules, which the legislation has actually repealed. And in law, we don't think we can be.
Okay, anything further to add, Stuart?
Thank you, Convener. So you see we have now a nice convergence between both accounting practice and law. The issue specifically around loans fund accounting, which Audit Scotland have taken a view on, is a legal issue. It's a matter of law as much as it is of accounting practice. So that's where we are. We have a position which was the position we have reflected in the unaudited financial statements, which will be considered by this committee in due course. So I don't want to preempt that discussion. In my response, reflects the budget position approved by Council and our understanding of a legal position. And as my colleague has said, we have sought senior external legal advice on that. So there's an ongoing discussion on loans fund accounting.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, there may be some things you can say, some you can't. Could I ask, first of all, does this specifically relate to local government finance circular, I think it's 7/2016, on loan accounting? And does it relate specifically to I think I'm right in saying about 75% of our long-term debt is over 10 years. Is it the maturity of that debt that's partly the issue here?
The issue does relate to the finance circulars, and also there's been a subsequent circular issued by Audit Scotland, which we have sought to clarify. It's not really about the maturity profile of our debt, Councillor Donaldson. It's really about how we have sought to reflect that in terms of our statutory loans fund. And the issue, as Mr Wilkie has succinctly put it, is about whether we can retrospectively look at the period over which we are writing that debt off.
Okay. Clearly there's going to be more information in the unaudited report and accounts, and maybe you can't comment at this stage. If the Audit Scotland position, though, was, and I'm fully aware this is a question of judgment, of accounting practices, and these can vary, but if the Audit Scotland position was to hold, what implications could there be for the Council? I know that's somewhat hypothetical.
Yeah, I think it is a hypothetical question, and I don't know if it's fair to ask anybody to answer hypothetical questions.
It just simply is what our risk exposure might be.
Michael, do you want to comment first?
I mean, just I guess hypothetically, and not to say that KPMG, as one of many auditors of local authorities, hasn't yet taken its own view, but it would be down to auditors to reach their own view in respect of the financial statements, taking into account I suppose the arguments that individual authorities make, because it's not just Perth and Kinross that is affected, along with the guidance which Audit Scotland ultimately concludes in issues following the ongoing consultation. But I guess auditors are not bound by Audit Scotland's interpretation of the legal point. However, we would obviously consider it together with any other arguments that are made.
Lisa, do you want to add something?
I think the other point to note is that we're not actually in direct conflict with Audit Scotland and with Scottish Government, because they're actually now looking to, they think they have to amend the legislation to allow everybody to do exactly what we're proposing to do. So they clearly, that was their parliamentary intention, that's what they wanted to do, but they don't think they've done that, and they think they need to make an amendment. Our legal opinion says we actually think within the scope of the legislation as currently stands, we are allowed to do that, and I don't know why you're bothering making any amendments to the legislation, because it's fine, just clarify the technical guidance. So it's not as if this is something that legislation wasn't supposed to permit. This is actually something that was the intention, but they don't think they've managed to deliver that in the way the legislation has been drafted as is. A number of local authorities and a few QCs disagree and think that we can do it within the scope as currently drafted.
So I think that's the key point, what the intent was here, and here's hoping that we can find a consensus at some point sooner rather than later. Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if I feel a bit of a bystander here between the two stewards who are financial gunslingers here, but I was just wondering if you could explain what the benefits of all this are, or pros and cons. I feel like I'm hanging onto the tail of the dragon here.
I think that's maybe one for you, Stuart. Good luck. I just see you with Stetson, but anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. I've been called many things in my time, but I'm not sure gunslinger. I'll take that. Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you. Essentially, what the in approving the 2018-19, sorry, 2000, yeah, I'm in the right financial year, 2018-19 revenue budget, the council approved a review. Well, actually, I have delegated authority to undertake a review of the council's loan fund accounting. So that was part of the budget process and budget setting for 2018-19. So the financial statements are based on that review of our loans fund, effectively. So the unaudited accounts are reflected, would reflect that position. What we then have is an issue which comes down to the interpretation of the statutory guidance and indeed the underlying statute and how far that goes, and then as a result of that, the independent audit of our statutory financial statements, which is just a normal process. So that's why it's an issue insofar as we've undertaken a review of our loans fund position, which is reflected in the council approved 18-19 revenue budget, and that has subsequently become a bit of an issue with Audit Scotland in terms of their interpretation of whether we can look to do that for debt retrospectively from the 1st of April 2016. So it's a very, very technical issue. But cutting to the chase, our external auditors will have to come to their own independent view around whether that is compliant or not with the regulations and the legislation.
Please do, yeah.
So what is the financial benefit, therefore, of us reviewing our loan, of you reviewing the loans? And is there a benefit to us by doing this financially or not?
There's a financial benefit, yes, which was reflected and reported to Council as part in December, actually. 2000 and my date's right now, I think it was 2017, in December 2017, and that formed part of the council's budget position, approved budget position for 18-19.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth.
Can I make a general comment about this? It's an excellent report and it reflects the high quality of our financial management team. So a great congratulations to everybody on this. Obviously there's a bit of debate about some small technicality and that's interesting, but we shouldn't let that get in the way of underlining what a fantastic report this is.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that except for the word small. I think it's quite a significant issue. But nevertheless, it's we understand the positions, we understand the debate that's going on, and we have to leave it to our senior officers and to KPMG to arrive at hopefully at an agreed position that will be reflected in this year's accounts. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Convener. So a couple of questions. The first one to follow up on Councillor Williamson's earlier questions. I'm pleased that Mr Mackenzie has clarified, because I took from Mr Wilkie's introduction that we hadn't done it, but I was under the impression that we had done it in last year's budget, so I'm pleased that you've clarified that that is the case. And so my first question is for Mr Mackenzie, which is what is the actual financial figure that this benefits us, which I think was Councillor Williamson's point. Ballpark.
It's £7 million, is the answer to your question. I think from memory it's somewhere around £3 to £4 million.
Okay, thank you. And the second part of my question is for Mr Wilkie, in terms of, you said you will take an opinion on this in the audit. If your opinion is different to that of the council and our QC, what impact would that have on our audit?
Ultimately, that could be a qualified opinion in the financial statements if we have a difference. And the point I was making about the council not having made an amendment, it actually reflects that some local authorities reflected amendments in their financial statements for the prior year, not just in their budget for the year ahead. For those councils, there could be some implications in terms of the opinion that has already been issued, but that doesn't apply to Perth and Kinross.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. That helps. And just moving on to a different topic now, the page 11 of your report, transfer of pensionable data and management review of assumptions. The first part you have given a satisfactory opinion of, and then you have a recommendation which is talking about pension assumptions. Now, am I right in terms of thinking this is around actuarial assumptions? Is that correct?
That's right, yes. Our recommendation is specifically that management document their consideration of the assumptions proposed by the actuary.
So is this a bit like showing you're working in an exam, basically? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think I saw Councillor Donaldson poised to my right with a further question.
I'm not going to ask about pensions, believe it or not, this time, because I'm going to leave that until June. Although it would be interesting to see what the commentary the accountants and the finance team might make towards actuaries, but I'll desist from any humorous jokes about actuaries. I would say it's not a small technicality. It really, this is, I think, really substantial. It's quite significant, and yet, it's a question of judgment. I'm not clear in my own mind how much we might have to, if Audit Scotland was to prevail, you might have to reverse things, and then you could actually move back to where you were before, because this is really what the Scottish Government wants. But what corrective action might we have to take? Or is that?
In terms of loans fund accounting, I think it would be premature for me to comment because obviously that would reflect in part the judgment that Mr Walker has got to take independently of his colleagues. So I think it would be premature for me to comment. Dawson, in fairness.
I think one observation I would make here, if I may, is this debate is extremely healthy. You know, we're getting true external challenge to the view of the council. It's a technical issue. It's not an immaterial issue, and I think it reflects very positively on the relationships between the council and the external auditors that we're able to have a debate on something like this, and you know, we can argue it openly and in public, and it's something that I think reflects well on the council as a whole. Are there any further questions? No. No, you're fine, you're fine. Okay, we're finished, are we? Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Michael, and sorry, I don't know your name. Adrian, thank you for your report, and Stuart for his comments, and Lisa, who's been very helpful today. Thank you very much, and we'll, as I say, the next meeting is the 26th of June, but we'll also try and arrange the development session as discussed as soon as practically possible. So thanks for your attendance and your contributions today. Thank you.